You're on the Bible Forum. This is segment number 3, July 1st, 2018. And if you're just tuning in, you missed the first two. I want to talk to you about guns in America. This week on the Glenn Beck radio program, Glenn read from the CDC report that in 2016, 2/3 of all suicides in America were the result of causes other than guns. Apparently, knives kill 5 times more often than guns. Now, it seems lately that guns are used only by desperate people. And that since 1950. Nearly all public mass shootings have occurred in gun-free zones. That's not an accident. 80% of mass shootings involve handguns, not automatic rifles. Did you know the United States has the highest gun ownership in the world? And that the U.S. ranks 28th in gun murders. The Swiss carry about 2 million guns, and they don't have hardly any legislative controls. I've been told that when you turn 18, you have to get a gun. Gun homicide in Switzerland stands at less than 1%. In 1996, Australia banned semi-automatic weapons. Since then, there has been an increase of 86% in firearm offenses, mostly where guns were stolen or purchased or bought illegally. In America, citizens own more guns than the U.S. military and the police departments combined. Did you know that? That's why the liberal left is so upset about your gun. More guns have been purchased since Donald Trump became president 17 months ago than the entire U.S. military possesses. What's that mean? It means the citizens of these United States will remain free, at least for the foreseeable future. Now, the point here is, generally speaking, liberals don't own guns. Generally speaking, liberals don't want guns at large in the society. Generally speaking, liberals don't even want the military to have guns or to have too many members. And if you don't believe that, look what happens when a liberal is either in the White House or has the votes in Congress. One of their first efforts is to emasculate the military. That's what happened in the last 8 years. I know comments like that stimulate all sorts of negative reaction among liberals and clearly the uneducated, which is a growing demographic in the last 70 years. But this is one of the products of over 70 years of progressive education in America's public school system. A system that not only refuses to teach U.S. history, but resorts to coloring the facts to fit their own philosophical view. A case in point, why do we have a Second Amendment? And why does the principle occur in the Second Amendment, the second principle occur in the Second Amendment? Do you understand it? They go out on the street and put microphones in front of young adults, and they can't tell you. They can't answer any of these questions. We have a Second Amendment, 2 parts, because the framers of our Constitution recognized the real threat, which is the government. That's why we have a Second Amendment, to forestall the government in this new experiment from taking over your life. They listed the rights of every citizen, rights everybody would be entitled to under this form of government, and the things the government would not be allowed. And chief among them, an elected Congress making laws not a president, an elected Congress making laws that would limit or eliminate religion and the free exercise thereof. They made an amendment that said that can't happen, protecting you from those who don't want you to worship the way you do. When I was a kid, that didn't make sense to me at all. But it sure does today, doesn't it? In their reference to religion, they were thinking Christian religion. Contemporary revisionists have added all sorts of religious beliefs to that principle, but the framers saw and thought only in terms of a biblical religion, Christianity. And they realized that a national religion, especially one not rooted in the Bible, would be just as dangerous as a tyrant king. You see, without the Bible, religionists would be free to create whatever doctrines they like, which is largely what's happening in what we call Christianity today. But I digress. The Second Amendment to the Constitution addresses speech and public assembly. The abridging of free speech shall not happen. The infringing upon the freedom of the press shall not be permitted. The right to peaceably assemble is inviolate. Peaceably. The right to petition the government for redress of grievances is fundamental to freedom. And in 1780, this was groundbreaking stuff, startling. And it threatened all who would seek political power. But these men, these framers, they knew the heart of human beings. They knew that human beings were not nice. They knew what the Bible said about the human heart, that it was desperately wicked, above anything you can think of. These men had lived through a truly terrible time at the hands of desperately wicked people, governed by a desperately wicked heart. And these men knew human history and its penchant for repetition. There was only one thing less threatening, and that was the infringement upon a person's right to bear arms. And that's the Second Amendment. That's why that amendment was number 2. The stated purpose was to protect our freedoms. To protect them against whom? Against what? They said it out loud. Against our government. There is no power on earth more dangerous than absolute power. History shows us that despots all either restricted or removed weapons from the common citizen. And these colonists had lived that reality, and they knew it would happen again unless there was a definitive limitation in place. What do those who hate freedom do first? Historically, and we have lived through some of this, they have limited and then confiscated weapons. The whole idea of licensing gun owners is rooted in that principle. No reason to license a gun owner, except you want to know where he is and how many guns he has. Men who hate freedom, except for themselves, need to know where the guns are and who owns them. So, well, the police do too. If we had a society that was operating the way it's supposed to, where the family was the core and the heart of that society, and where God reigned in the hearts of people, you wouldn't need police at all. It's about knowing where to look should the need arise. The next 4 amendments deal with the other issues surrounding our basic rights to privacy, about a fair and speedy trial, being judged by our peers, not by a prince of the realm. That we now have professional politicians ought to frighten all of us. Here's a contemporary perspective. I mentioned this in a previous article, but it fits here. It came from here. And it's about former President Bush's press secretary, Ari Fleischer. He tweeted last week. He said, after 9/11, bin Laden called for the killing of Americans and Jews. Being a Jew, he asked the Secret Service if he needed to be concerned, and they told him, don't worry about it. Imagine how nutty and real the threats against Sarah Sanders must be for the U.S. Secret Service now to give her and her family at home protection. Is it because so many Americans now own guns? No. It's because of the rhetoric from both the lawless fringe and from members of Congress on the liberal side of the aisle. Maxine Waters comes to mind, a U.S. representative from California. For 25 years, she is rapidly becoming mainstream in the fight for a progressive policy. At a speech in defense of those who have come into this country illegally, she told the assembled masses, let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, a department store, or a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. You push back on them. You tell them they're not welcome here anymore, anywhere. We've got to get the children connected to their parents. Appearing later on MSNBC, she said she had, quote, no sympathy, end of quote, for members of the Trump administration. She said the people are going to turn on them. They're going to protest. They're going to absolutely harass them until they decide that they're going to tell the president, no, I can't hang with you. Among even the most strident Democrats in Congress, this seems to have gone too far. Level heads are asking for calm and separating from Walter's rhetoric. This is what the human heart looks like without adequate restraint. That our Constitution is under attack ought to frighten every American. That our Bible is being subverted and distorted in mainstream churches ought to frighten every American. For without the Bible, there would be no Constitution. And without the Constitution, both would be interpreted according to an ordinary system of interpretation, meaning it would have no reality, only rhetoric and distortion. When these settle into the minds and the hearts of the majority of citizens, the once grand experiments called the United States will be forever dead. She's on life support now, not because more and more people have guns, but because more and more people have heart trouble.